be here now. Just be here now.
Hey everyone, it's Raghu. I'm back with Mind Rolling and Johnny Pemberton. And Johnny and I were just trying to figure out, when did we first meet? It's a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And our mutual friend, Duncan Trussell, put us together. And I just thought it's been too long. And I've always wanted to do this, Johnny. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. That was intentional, by the way.
Oh, it was? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, good.
Just set you at ease.
Yeah, good. Oh, God. So there's a lot of intersections, as I found out. But one interesting thing, I was just told that you were recently at a Delhi conference. Were you at a deli conference recently?
Like deli meats, like thinly sliced meats, or deli like the city?
Deli. It's kind of delic.
Oh, delic. Oh, right. The meat deli. Yeah.
Delic. The meat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it could be meat deli.
I would love an actual a deli conference where it was just a sampling different
just go around and eat bagels and learn about how they get.
That would be great. Actually, I might make that happen now.
And I am an expert around bagels because I'm from Montreal.
Oh, that's the best bagels.
Montreal had these European Jews that came there, and they have these specific recipes and specific brick ovens down in the old section of Montreal. It's called the Maine, Saint Laurent.
I've had them many times. It's something I haven't had in so long that there's actually a place in LA that just opened up a Montreal-style bagel. And I think they just have lines. You can't get them unless you want to wait in line for an hour and a half. Yeah. Because everyone knows how good they are. They're so great. They're the best.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And we also have something in Montreal called smoked meat. Not that I eat meat anymore, but even when I wasn't really eating meat, I go to Montreal and hang, get family, whatever it was. I would go, it's called Schwartz's.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah, I've been to Schwartz. I've had the meat. Yeah, because there's a comedy festival in Montreal.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I've done it maybe 3 times, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that. So the first time I definitely had plenty of smoked meat. And the second time I had slightly less. And the third time I think maybe it's like, okay, I think I've had enough of this smoked meat for a while.
Yeah. It's, what about the French fries? Come on.
Oh, yeah. The poutine.
Yeah. I mean, the
Which
best.
is not the same as poutine, right?
No. Not at all.
Yeah.
But addicting as well, if that's
true.
So anyhow, at the Meat Delic conference, I love that. Of course, your friends Duncan and Aubrey Markus were there. Yeah, tell me about that. What was that all about?
It was, I guess it's some conference that was supposed to happen a year prior, but obviously all these things happened that stopped them. And it was just a big psychedelic conference. They had a bunch of music. They had a bunch of I would call it like a symposium, but that's like, I think that's more of a doctor kind of thing. But it was like a psychedelic symposium. So
speakers and all that.
Yeah, we did a live podcast. Duncan recorded a live version of his podcast and had some guests, me being one of them. And it was pretty cut and dry. We were in and out. And it was really fun.
You did your thing and that was it. But it all, of course, lends itself to the reality of what is your connection with entheogens?
I suppose for me, probably it started when I was in high school, and I was just in Minnesota. And a good friend of mine who passed away last year, he was growing psilocybin mushrooms. And he found a way to do it in his basement at home. He was probably 16 years old.
Oh, really?
And he was really into Terrence McKenna. And we played in a jazz group together. So he's just a real high-minded individual, just incredibly intelligent, probably one of the smartest people I've ever known in my entire life. But he got me into that along with our other bandmates. And I remember the first time I ever took psilocybin mushrooms. It was like, I think I was probably 16 or 17. And yeah, I think that was my introduction to it. I think probably the actual introduction to anything like that probably came through music, because I was really, really into music, still am. But back then it was like, that was the content of my life, was music. Nothing else was
You and me
as
both,
important.
brother.
Yeah. And there's so much psychedelic aspects, psychedelic aspects to music that's kind of unavoidable at some point.
Yeah, start with stopping your mind.
Yeah.
That's a good thing
Mm-hmm.
on both levels, yeah. Both the psychedelic. We should have a little bit of a caveat here about 16, 17, that, you know, you were experimenting with psychedelics and so on. When anybody ever tells me that, or I say it about myself, and I always say, please try and at the very least follow Alpert and Leary's suggestions around set and settings, okay? Because it is important.
Very
you
important.
cannot play around with this shit. I know many of us, and I say us, have played around, and it's part of growing up. But, you know, when you have some people who are experienced saying, especially Leary and Alpert. I mean, I hung out with who became Ram Dass.
Right.
We were once in the Himalayas, up in the middle of nowhere, looking at the 28,000 foot peaks all across the horizon, right? And he was regaling us of psychedelic stuff with Leary and all of that, Millbrook and elsewhere, you know, at school, Harvard. And these guys were obviously out there as pioneers and offering themselves up to experiment on what this stuff really was. So all I'm saying is, yeah, it's good to look to them and look to, especially around set and settings.
Yeah, that was actually something that for the longest time, I had trouble even thinking about. When people would talk about doing them recreationally, I was always just, I don't think that's good, really. You have to really do this with intention and figure out where you're going to be and everything. You have to do your homework before you do that, because otherwise you can have some pretty heavy consequences.
So where did this go for you, though, as you became an adult?
I don't know. I think I think for me, the main thing it did was sort of just show me some stuff that was I would never have seen otherwise, like some sort of, it opened my mind up to ideas that were not really concrete ideas, but maybe feelings about the sort of the sameness of the world, and the idea that there's really not a lot of differences between us, and having perspective. I'd say perspective was probably the biggest thing. It gave me this perspective of something that helped me. I mean, it's probably helped me in more ways than I can possibly imagine. I also think it's a thing where it's, I'm sure I developed as a person as a result, and the timeline that I exist in now as this person is a direct result of having that perspective shift at a relatively young age that gave me the ability to interact with things and probably deal with certain problems, because I was able to maybe take a step back.
Yeah. I would say that when I talk about this stuff as well, not necessarily just psychedelics or anything like that, but just the path and where we're at and what we're dealing with and so on. And my first recommendations are perspective and trust. Probably start with trust, you know, and I'm very fortunate that I met Ram Dass when I was in my early 20s. And so that trust led me to a path that I had no idea even existed. Nothing. I had no idea. It just felt good. That's all.
Yeah.
You know, it just felt good. So perspective, then I could see that, okay, there's many different viewpoints from which to see your day-to-day, quote-unquote, reality. And some of the, you know, incredible methodology that he brought back that really, you know, of course, is all Eastern, was just extraordinarily helpful. But do you know that, too, this just reminds me, this movie we did, a doc, Becoming Nobody, with Ram Dass. It is both gives a real idea of his teachings and his style, and he was known as the spiritual Lenny Bruce back in the day, basically. Yeah. And in that movie, I mean, there's so much in it of real value to absorb. But the director asks him, Jamie Cotto, says, so what are the two most important things that you could share with me about, whatever you've gotten all of these years, all the practice you've done, etc.?
2 and not 1 or 3. I like that.
Just 2.
He
said 2. You only get 2. You know what he said? Love and humor.
Wow.
Okay? So I was thinking about you.
That's pretty good.
And just that we were going to talk, and I remembered this thing. And, of course, everybody... I haven't even introduced you.
That's okay. I like a late introduction. It's always better.
It is?
I think so.
Anyhow, Johnny is an actor and a stand-up. I don't know. I guess we are going back out on the road now?
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, I know, because Duncan
like
told me he was too.
You can't just dive in anymore. You have to kind of like go for it and see how long you can sustain. Because if you build up too much of a thing, you run the risk of...
Yeah, a lot of cancellations that people aren't happy about. Yeah. So, yeah, Johnny has... Johnny looks like he's... well, you guys are watching this on YouTube, Maybe looks like 18 or something. And but he's been doing this a while.
The camera does a lot for me. I think it's deceiving. I don't think I can quite do 18 anymore, but
no, maybe not. But the truth is perspective. Yeah. All right. Well, give me a little of your perspective that you that has given you a point of view that really has changed the way you relate with the constant phenomena that approaches us on a moment-to-moment basis.
I mean, there's a lot to say there, I suppose. I think a big thing for me, as far as we're talking about perspective, was I've had an illness for most of my life. Had a bowel disease called colitis.
Oh yes, I know it well. My first wife had it. Yep, it's not fun.
Yeah, it's not great. I've had it since I was really, really young. So for me, it was never something where like it didn't just hit me. I kind of grew up with it, and so I think a lot of times when you grow up with something, you don't really. It's not as bad to you as it seems to others. Obviously, that was very difficult a lot of times, and there was different times that were more difficult than others.
Well, my wife was the mother of my children was in the hospital for 6 months, I think.
Okay, see, I never had to experience that. I had surgery, which was that's a different thing. You're recovering from surgery, but not. I've never had been hospitalized for the colitis. I had like one time I think I had a bowel blockage, but that was cleared up probably like in 2 days or something like that. So that's
good to know.
Yeah, but I've never had that thing where a lot of people who have Crohn's or colitis will have these things where they're just their body is failing them and they have to go in the hospital. Terrible. But I've been really lucky with that regard. I don't know. I mean, it's a weird disease. It's a strange thing. There's a huge mental aspect of it, and I don't think I learned that until much later. So I think having that really changed my perspective on things because it made a lot of things I wanted to do not possible. And I think it's when you can't do the things you want, especially when you're younger, you feel kind of like you've been cheated. But at the same time, I think you have to find a way to be happy and get around it. Otherwise, you're just going to be destroyed by this thing. And I suppose that for me, music was a big thing. And any kind of creative thing like painting or anything creative whatsoever, anything that was like a creative outlet to me was what I was really interested in because I felt like this is accessible to me regardless of how I'm feeling physically. And because at the time, like all throughout high school and junior high and everything, when you have a bowel disease, there's this thing that happens where you become very afraid to travel because you need to be near a bathroom and you don't want to have an accident because it's like is there anything more embarrassing in this entire world than having an accident? Obviously there is, but at the time, it feels so embarrassing. So there's a lot of stuff I limited myself with. Oh my God, you know what's so funny? This is so strange, Raghu. Okay, so I have literally the same type of door, and and my dog is about the same size, and she would be coming through the door just the same way as that. And it's just like, it's such a strange coincidence. It's kind of blowing my mind right now. The fact like you have the same shape of door, same black handle with a dog coming through.
The same dog.
Yeah, it's the same dog. It's like we're just in like mirror worlds right now.
Yeah. We're
That's so funny.
well on our way through the metaverse for sure.
Yeah. Except my camera's facing the other direction. So I'm like basically looking at your door right now. And if I look to my right, there's the same door, just bigger and in reality and not on the TV. God, so strange.
All right. Yeah. So through this, we're talking about perspective and perch from which you see it all.
Right.
And how did this disease, well, you did say, of course, it forced you into letting go. I mean, not so many words, right?
I mean, it's somewhat. I think there's a lot of resistance. I developed a lot of resistance it's coming from me, resisting this and feeling like I want to be a bohemian. I want to like travel around and do that kind of stuff, you know, right? Because everyone's reading Jack Kerouac probably back around then. And it's like a thing where it's so appealing. Not to say anything of him now, good or bad, but I think there's definitely a lot of, what do you say? You romanticize the thing. And so when you romanticize something that you can't have this thing, it makes it even more desirable. And for me, that was a thing where I was like, I wanted this so bad to be able to do this stuff, but I felt like I couldn't because of the illness. And so I had to find other ways to do this type of thing, to build up who I was, like who am I, without being able to be like a bohemian type of thing.
Yeah.
I think that meant like doubling down with getting into music, I got really into jazz because that felt like a similar thing where you're in this vanguard, you like this thing that's has like a lot of, it's very progressive and novel.
Yeah. Well, the improvisational aspect of it.
Totally.
The way that it's just tuning into intuition and not anything in your mind. That kind of practice does change your perspective. And of course, suffering changes your perspective, which is what you're really talking about. So I guess when I talk about it, the crucial thing, Ram Dass did this in the most simple way. He said, take a few breaths into the center of your chest, your spiritual heart, soul, no mind, whatever the hell you want to call it. And then once you're moved into that place, that is the place that is not your mind, is not your judgments. And from that place, you can really relate with your world in a far more skillful manner, at the very least. And of course, to get there is part and parcel of it all is some kind of trust. I mean, and Duncan Trussell is probably a great example of somebody who he did not ignore that he felt this kind of trust with Ram Dass in particular, to the point where he called me to like say, okay, this is what should happen right now. And it was all around podcasts, and here we are, it'll be almost 6 years or something of doing the Be Here Now network and all of these wonderful podcasts and growing enormously. So the idea that the perspective includes not hammering yourself over the head with every misstep, so non-judgment and being present way more because there's less fear of what's going to happen in the future. That's the only perspective, I think, if we could just all get there, never mind the other highfalutin kind of philosophical enlightenments and all that bullshit. Because if we can get there, then we can start to be a little bit kinder to each other, I think.
Yeah, the fear stuff is is such a, I mean, that's like a word where it's such a small word, but it has so much meaning. And it's the kind of thing where I find myself a lot of times, even recently, especially with the pandemic, because it's changed, it's just upended so many things that you used to be able to do with ease. And how it's like I found myself being like really fearful of things again, but not like fearful in the sense of like actual fear, like fear of like a tiger or something like that, but fear of what other people will think about something, or fear to try to do something, fear to like engage with something, because now more than ever we have so many people looking at us and the ability to judge. Like you can comment on anything. It's just this thing where it's like straight to the comments lifestyle, where it took me a while to figure out like that stuff is just so absolutely I don't want to say worthless, but it has almost no weight. Like all this commentary and thinking about that. And it's something I still struggle with, like constantly, the idea where you have to make something that's true to you and not be fearful about what you're presenting, because you're not going to make something that's perfect. You're just going to make something that just doing the thing. That's the hardest part. And anyone who gives you shit about anyone who's trying to pull you down is probably just jealous or has an issue with with what they're trying to do that they can't seem to manifest. And so when you see something else, you get angry about it, because it's like this thing where it's like, what they're doing this thing that I want to do, but I can't do it. And I find myself doing the same thing, where it takes so much, I guess, mindfulness to remember that and to persist in the face of so much constant reminders of.
Yeah, you know what to me, it's no more or less that kind of. One is talking to oneself and saying, "Shit, that's beautiful out there. Wait, why can't I? I deserve that, and I'm doing whatever it is." The objectifying of absolutely everything inside you is the same polarization that we have on a much more sort of obvious level with the us and the them, right? Whoever it is, vax, non-vax, of course, all of the political stuff that's going down. It's all very, very tough, and there's not the fact. So being unaware or being in a perspective, go back to perspective, where you don't have that mindfulness, that what you're doing inside yourself in terms of projecting either something you want or something you don't want, or judging another person or judging yourself, or all of it at one time, right? I mean, that is absolutely what's got to get cleared up before you have any chance, in my mind, of being able to be helpful to cut through polarization that is going on. I mean, very difficult.
It is. It's the problem of our time. I feel like that's the thing where that's the real issue. It's the core of everything. It seems to be right now it's the polarization and stuff. And I think that the way out of it is to see other people as the same, but that involves like taking stock of yourself and realizing. I mean, it's like it goes. When I think about it, it goes all over the place. But I like a lot of it has to do with expectations. And the idea that none of us deserve anything ever at all. But at the same time, it's that duality, the duality of you should expect nothing whatsoever and anything ever, always. But also you should love yourself and feel deserved of anything good that comes to you is deserved. Because it's like nothing is ever deserved, but also that's because everything is deserved.
Mm-hmm.
It's that weird duality that you can't quite say, but you can feel it. When you're feeling it, you're like, oh, I can feel this. I can feel this. Oh, I feel warmth for this person and not jealousy. I feel like attraction and not fear. I
mean, I think that what you're speaking to really is another thing that I love that Ram Dass used to talk about all the time. You can live on more than one plane of consciousness at the same time. We as humans can do that. So there's the plane in which expect nothing. That has more to do with the reality of being in that place of expecting nothing means you have done a lot of spiritual work in this lifetime and have gotten, the grace to be in a place where you're not expecting. You are living the Bhagavad Gita, which is expect nothing. Do what you got to do, but don't expect the results. Don't look for the results, basically. So that's one level. And the other level is whatever comes to us because we are doing the right thing. We are working to our best ability and coming from a place where we're not going to climb over people's heads to get ahead and do all the kinds of things that are around greed and selfishness. And you deserve what comes back from good action, karma, right?
Yeah.
And that's a good point. Two planes at the same time.
I've never heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense because that basically solves the problem I had in my head just now. So now I'm like,
oh yeah,
it is the duality because it's the two things at the same time that seem to be contrary, but they're not contrary because it's like things overlaying each other, not in opposition.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's hard to explain to people. I think it's a lot of times where people get hung up on the kind of things we're talking about is because a lot of these things seem contradictory. If you just think about it, well, why doesn't it make any sense? But it's because it doesn't really make any sense. But that's okay because it's not really. Well, it's not about making sense, is it?
Yeah. Stop making sense. Yeah, that great record.
Making sense is just what an overrated idea. something making sense.
Yeah, exactly. God, I love that record, David Byrne. Film, right? It's a film.
Well, it's a couple things.
Film and
right?
a record, whatever it is. David
Live
Byrne.
Record, right? Live album.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Stop making sense the problem is our God is our mind because we're used to being with that mind 24/7. Yeah. Duncan and I are working on this thing called From the Movie of Me to the Movie of We, and just using ourselves, in terms of how we identified the me, which isn't too difficult, the roles and the identities and all that. And then how that, what is the process by which the transformation can happen, right? Once you realize what the we is as real as the me, and that's back to the, two planes at the same time, the, relative and real, the relative and the real. So part of what we've been doing is just kind of investigating what are the things that we can do. You talked about mindfulness and so on. By the way, koans, right?
Say that again?
That's Koans, koan.
Oh, that
right. The Japanese.
I always said cone, but it makes more sense. Koan.
Sidney Cone invented them.
Okay. Yeah, Sidney Cone. That's like the puzzle, right? The sort of the logic puzzle that makes you think. A cone.
Yeah. What's the sound of one hand clapping is the most famous thing, and the idea is to stop the mind that we make king, and believe all of our thoughts. That's the first. Somebody who says, "Wait a minute, what are you talking about?" Okay, well, let's start with you have a lot of thoughts that are going on. Yeah, everybody thinks. You believe them? Yeah, sure. Let's start there. That's the starting place, And I think one interesting. So talk a little bit about comedy. How did you get into comedy, and how did that infiltrate your life?
I moved out to Los Angeles as a plan to do comedy because I really wanted to. That's what I wanted to do. I went to college and I studied kind of like radio. And I did a little bit of filmmaking, more like video, like short comedy videos and stuff like that. So I was always really interested in that medium a lot. But in my heart, I always knew I really wanted to do live performance. I mean, I don't like to say stand-up anymore because I feel like stand-up is such like it's almost like a trade word. Like for me,
is.
I don't mind other people say it, but for me, I feel like saying stand-up makes me feel like I'm saying, like, oh, I'm a certain type of welder. Like, oh, I do this type of welding, where it's like, really, it's just, if you're performing live, it's all the same thing, essentially.
Yeah.
There's clear distinctions. There's obviously all kinds of things. When it comes down to it, you're being in the moment in front of people with the goal of sharing something. And if it's comedy, it's sharing something that's funny. Because I so many of the things, like when I'm writing a joke or something, so many of the times, like I'll stop myself. It's like, oh, people are going to understand this. And I have to say, oh yeah, of course they are. Because everyone, if I think something, that means everyone's thinking the same thing. Maybe not everyone, but there's definitely enough people who are thinking the same thing. And if they're not thinking the exact same thing, what I do is I explain it so you understand it. But I think I kind of got into comedy. I mean, I've been just goofing off since I can remember. Like I was always a kid who was incredibly curious, like just really, 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 really curious. I love to watch things. I really love observing. I just like that to me is so incredibly underrated in terms of not so much a skill, but something where, God, how do you say this? Something where like the more you observe, the more you have in your toolkit, essentially. It's like my first words, the best example is, pretty sure my first words were, "What is this?" I didn't have a first word. I didn't have a mom or dad. I said, "What is this?" Like through a pacifier. And I just have, yeah. I mean, it sounds crazy.
Come on. You want to hear my first word?
Yeah.
It's embarrassing next to yours. Yours is the highest spiritual content. Mine was horse.
That's pretty cool.
Horse.
I mean, we must have been around horses, right?
I saw a horse outside. I went, horse. Someone said the horse.
So cool.
You're saying, like, who am I and what am I here for? Okay. And I'm going, look at the horse.
I mean, I was probably looking at like a block or like I might have been looking at a figurine of a horse, been like, what is this? What is this? Trying to say it through my pacifier.
Yeah, right.
And I suppose that's sort of what started me in comedy is I just have always been just incredibly curious about a lot of everything. And I feel like comedy is something where when you dig around a lot and you like watching things and if you like observing certain things, it becomes the thing where you're just trying to find something that's funny. Like I think a lot of comedians really like to laugh because they like to find things that are funny because it makes them feel good. And I really think a huge amount of comedians, I'd say almost all of them, are in comedy because comedy is the greatest medicine for existential dread. Because life is absolute hell to some extent, especially if you have like certain unchangeable circumstances that you come from. And comedy is like this instantaneous cure to anything you feel bad about because you cannot feel bad when you're laughing at something. So for me, I think that's probably what drew me to it, not consciously at all. I just love to fuck around, fuck around and find out what happens when you do something or say something in a certain way. And it's kind of like alchemy in a weird way, where if you put these things together, if you just say something in a certain way, it's funny, but if you say it another way, it's serious. What a strange thing. Like I used to get in trouble in school because I would say we were doing the book Gulliver's Travels. We were watching that movie that's Ted Danson stars as Gulliver. And I would say sometimes in the back class, I go, Ted Danson. I would just say it and I got in trouble for just saying Ted Danson too much in a weird way. And I'm like, I'm just saying Ted Danson. She's like, you can't do that because it's making everyone laugh and we can't work. And I'm like, it's
terrible.
Nothing. And it's this thing where I wasn't like in deep trouble. It was just, kind of a good-natured talking to. But I think there's stuff like that where it's like comedy is this thing where it's never old. It's always interesting because you're using words like alchemy.
Alchemy, great word. I actually saw someone in India actually perform alchemy right in front of me. He had the power.
What was it?
He could turn liquid mercury into a lingam, which is an egg that represents Shiva, the god Shiva.
Okay.
So it's like a cylindrical thing. And he had them, and he lived in this remote probably one of the furthest places I ever been. I've been different places around the world, certainly India. And he had a cave underneath. It was through a trap door that went underneath his room.
Wow.
And he was up like a mile and a half up on a kind of mountain ledge where the holiest river in India comes from, called the Narmada. And, if you've heard about the Ganges, people
Right.
go bathe in the Ganges and their sins get evaporated in this life. If you even see the Narmada, all of your sins for all lives, boom. So I would sit in it with the waterfall, please help me.
Wow.
Anyhow, he had this cave where it was like the source of the river, and he had all these lingams that he would make out of liquid mercury. Now, I never saw him do that, but he talked about alchemy one day, and he put some coins in his hand, right? And he put one coin in his hand, an Indian coin, and he said, all material comes from nothing and goes back to nothing, and whatever, all the molecules. He was giving a whole dissertation, but meanwhile, I sit there and watch the coin start to fizzle up, smoke, and turn into ash in his hand.
It's a great magic trick.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But I knew, he was a very powerful yogi. So this was a low level, what they call in India, siddhi. But alchemy. The real alchemy is, of course, changing our guts and that polarity that's inside ourselves, like we were talking earlier. That's the real alchemy. And that takes effort. And the only way you give effort to do something like that is because you're sick of being, this person that believes in their thoughts and their story and is absolutely, fighting in every way to satisfy the little self, me person. So that's what this whole thing that I've been doing with Duncan. I said, we're doing this because we're sick of it. And we're not going to take it anymore. Remember that movie?
Yeah, from is it Network?
Yeah, Network, Patty. Yeah. Okay, wait. Now, did you get into acting before comedy? How did that work?
Well, I mean, I'd done some acting, like theater stuff in high school and just kind of, rinky-dink stuff like that. But then I moved out here to do comedy. I started doing improv, taking improv classes. And then I started doing stand-up a little bit after that. Just kind of like, I don't know. I mean, starting to do stand-up is one of those things where it's just kind of just do it. It's not like you have to get certified or anything. It's one of the few things where there is literally there's nothing at all between you and doing it except for maybe a few people. Like what is stand-up? I don't know. I guess maybe 2 or more people, probably, I would like to think. But people do it to one person. It's still the thing. I started acting after doing comedy. I don't know. I kind of slowly got into it. It's one of those things where I didn't mean to do that, but I kind of just fell into it because it was a thing where it's a way to make money. It's a way to live. And if you have opportunity to do it and someone wants to send you on an audition, you go on there and do it. I definitely had no idea what I was doing for probably about 2 years. It's enough time to where I look back and think, if I had just decided maybe I'll take an acting class. Maybe I'll just try to be I don't know everything, to try like to not go into something where I don't know the words, I don't know any of the script. I'm thinking I'm smarter than the person who wrote this, thinking like I'm just going to wing this, no problem. If I had managed to get rid of the attitude earlier, like who knows what I'd be doing right now. But I think it was a couple years in, I decided to take an acting class. And I think from there, it really started to take off because I realized that, you have to actually practice. And when you practice something, a lot of really good things happen for you.
Yeah, every level of that. And that's what I was meaning about the alchemy of turning your inside polarity inside out, basically, that alchemy. And it takes tremendous practice. There's nothing you can do that doesn't take tremendous practice.
Yeah, I think it's about having some fealty to God or the universe or whatever. It's about just sort of bowing your head. I think it took me a while to do that.
Yeah. Can you remember the first time you stood up on a stage?
Well, what's a stage? Is it a living room? Does that count?
No. I would say, something off of, Sunset Boulevard kind of thing.
Actually, yeah. That's because the first time I ever did stand up for real was at the Comedy Store
Right.
in the Belly Room. I think it was probably the third time I did it. The first time I ever did it was in someone's living room in college. And that's not, that was just goofing around with like a lamp turned on its side. And after like having many beers and just jotting stuff down on a Post-it note. The second time I ever did it, or second or third time, was opening up for a web talk show. That was the biggest mistake I've ever made. It was terrible. It was horrible. And like people wouldn't look me in the eye because I bombed so hard. But then I had someone help me basically pare down my material, make it, just condense it, make it punchier. And he put me on his show in the Comedy Store at the Belly Room. And I was so incredibly nervous because my last experience was this web talk show where I was doing warm-up, which is, I emailed a friend of mine who's much older, who's a writer, very successful writer, actor. I told him about this, and he said, "Why would you ever think that was a good idea to do that?" I was like, I didn't know. He's like, when we do the warm-up, we have like crazy like stunt acts come out and people with t-shirt cannons and just wild stuff. We don't have someone doing stand-up for the first time ever to warm these jaded people up. So that I was so nervous for that Comedy Store thing, and I spent a lot of time just working on my stuff, writing it out a bunch. I had a little piece of paper maybe in front of me that had my stuff on it, and I told my jokes, and it was like the reaction was so overwhelming. You can see my face. I have a video cassette of this actually. You can see my face. I'm like so taken aback that people are laughing.
Oh my God.
I'm like so surprised that this is actually happening. Like,
wow.
What the fuck? This is crazy. And I did the rest of my jokes, and it was just like the rest is, I guess you could say it's kind of history. It just, that sort of cemented my interest in it because I was like, wow, you can do this. It's not what I thought it was before. It's like actually possible to do this and have a good outcome.
Yeah. Are you still, and you're still acting as well? I don't know.
What
are you in?
Right now, I'm not working on anything right now, but there's, I don't know. I do all kinds of, I'm doing a lot of little things here and there. I do a lot of voice work too. I like.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, the voice work to me is really fun because it's so imaginative because you're doing something where you kind of have to bring everything because you can't rely on any kind of visual cue. You have to make it all, everything you're saying, everything you're conveying has to be conveyed in your voice.
Yeah, and the tone and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's so much great acting that happens with just the tiniest of looks and facial expressions. I was watching that movie Shampoo the other day. Have you seen that movie? Shampoo?
Oh yeah, 4 billion years ago.
God, who is it? Who is the British woman in that movie? Julie Christie.
Yeah.
There's one scene where it's Julie Christie and Warren Beatty, and I swear to God, I don't know if it's intentional or if she like was waiting for him to respond and just kept going because he missed a line. But she does this stuff with her face for a second where she just is like, there's about 2 seconds of no talking, but it's her. You see her face go through like 4 or 5 different things before she speaks again. And you're like, my God, that was so funny. so funny and weird and conveyed so much. You just love it. And with like voiceover, obviously you can't do that. So it's something where you kind of have to find a way to convey an idea or an emotion through the way you say something.
Yeah.
And so it involves like, I just love the trick of it. It's like almost like a little puzzle kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean because I started out in radio and we were doing that kind of thing all the time. We used to do stuff like, it was in Montreal. It was a large station. I mean, it had a 50,000 watts or something. And there was censors in the government and people would report you for swearing.
Right.
And so we said, let's try this. Gee, the weather today is going to be absolutely fucking gorgeous. And it will never, ever did we get a censure.
That's
never.
Funny.
Just tone of voice. It's all, that's so, there's a whole thing in Tibetan Buddhism, by the way, around tone of voice.
Really? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're able to control elements and people and so on with tone of voice. Yeah. Well, you know it. Just that's what people are doing all the time. Right? And yeah, I had fun that way in terms of doing some voiceover stuff with Duncan.
Oh, right.
And you
for
did
Midnight
it too.
Gospel, right?
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
I hadn't done that before, but
it's the greatest.
Yeah. So what was I going to say? I was going to say something about, you talked about how you love to just really become aware of people and surroundings and just kind of watch, right?
Yeah.
That was something that was
I really do.
I wanted to. Yeah, no. I just wanted to equate it with something that's a real practice. Not suggesting this isn't a real practice.
Okay, right.
But it's something from Ram Dass too. He first came back from India in the 60s before I went over with him and others. And it is using witness. And it's pretty much the same thing. It is, of course, self-directed so that you are aware. It's mindfulness. It's now, that's the term. Back then, Ram Dass was using a term. It actually, I think, came from Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, these Eastern European spiritual teachers. And it only, though, can happen in terms of everything that you see, all the phenomenon you see, through people, through events, physical activity, animals, trees, flowers, and the internal dialogue that's going on, and the motivations that are happening. And the witness can only really be a witness if it's not in your head. Because if it's in your head, it's constant, that motherfucker. Jesus, he did that. God, why did you do that? You're so stupid. And on and on. I mean, if we talked actually to other people the way that we talk to ourselves,
oh man,
you'd be put in jail.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So the witness, so I was just, equating this, which obviously was something really crucial for you in terms of developing what we talked about before, which is perspective. But comedy, it would seem to me, has to lend itself to being able to see people, situations, etc.
Yeah,
Clearly.
For real. It's definitely something where when you watch something, you're just, if you're quiet, because that's I think to me is a big part about watching and observing, is it forces you to listen and you can't think about a lot of other things because you're watching something else. I mean, that's why we like plays so much. That's why we like movies so much. A lot of that stuff will never go away, because when you're observing someone and they're being truthful in their actions, like if you're watching a person just randomly, if you're just like watching someone who can't tell that you're watching them do whatever they do, you're taken out of yourself because you're absorbed in what they're doing. And it's this really, really spiritual thing, because you're totally, time goes away because you're focused in on observing this thing that's happening. especially if you're watching someone who's unaware, you're basically just watching, you're watching truth. You're watching the truth of something. And I think that's why that's why everyone, no matter what, hates bad acting. They hate seeing bad performances because you're seeing something that's not true. Because when someone's doing doing not a good job, not a great job, I mean like someone just doing the job. If you're doing the job as an actor, you're being truthful in the moment with what's presented with you. It's the truth of the situation. So when we watch that as viewers, we're so relaxed, and it feels so good to just watch something. You're watching the truth. You're watching the story, the truth of this story. That's the same reason I think why we love watching animals. Like just to watch an animal eat. Like I love watching my dog eat her breakfast and dinner because it's just I don't know, it's like it's very calming to watch an animal do something because everything animals do is they can't lie. An animal can't lie. So everything they do is this truth. And we love it. We love animals for that. We also love people for the same reason. So I think there's something about like when you watch something, you get to see this truth and you get to like kind of take it in, like soak it up, and then maybe use that later when you're doing the same thing, when you're having a performance, when you're having like if you're doing an impression of someone. Like we watch someone do an impression and they don't sound exactly like them, but if they have the truth of that person, it's like everything, all the gaps get filled in. All of a sudden you're watching that exact person they're doing an impression of because your brain has been seduced. And that sort of stuff is so magical to me. The idea where you can, if you watch enough stuff, if you observe enough things in your life, if you're constantly observing and like taking in new information that's truthful, it gives you so much to give back in the same way. Like if I see something that's funny, and I'm telling a story about it on stage about that, and I do like a impression of the person I was witnessing. In my head, in that moment when I'm presenting it, I am the person I was watching because in my head I'm seeing the person talking who I'm doing the impression of, and I'm literally, I feel like I am them. It's not something where I'm trying to do it. It's just, to me, it feels like I am doing them. And that's like this weird sort of, it's almost like time travel or something crazy it's super highfalutin, but at the same time, it's also the most basic thing that's ever existed.
Yeah. That's a great practice right there. I mean, wonderful in terms of finding the way in which I think you said earlier in this chat, the ways we're alike. We're alike in a lot more ways than we are unlike. And this is a great practice for that. And that's really cool, man.
Like living in, I think that's also the thing where there's always, people do impressions of politicians and impressions of every kind of person. I think that you really can't, if you're doing an impression of someone, in a way, you'll love them because you are embodying their spirit. If you're doing a good impression of them, even if we're like lampooning someone for something terrible they're doing, it's still an act of love to a fellow human because you're enacting their spirit.
Yeah. That reminds me, of course, when you talk also about your dog, and I love just watching him eat, or him or she.
Yeah.
Just the naturalness of it, truth of it, then complete. There's no phony anything going on. This is just direct what nature is expressing in this case. And and it made me think of all the native traditions, right? Yeah. And the fact, of course, we go and kill and marginalize and starve and everything else that white people have done. Us, it's all in us. And how much do we need that connection to the natural processes of life that you get through nature, basically? Yeah. And through a real interconnectivity. Wow. Huh?
Yeah, it's so essential. I even think that dogs, like, I think about this a lot with dogs because I love dogs. And the idea that like dogs, to me, I really think that dogs are, I know they're not humans, but there's nothing closer to a human than a dog in terms of its mindset and how how it lives because we've been living symbiotically for so long. Like it's such an ancient relationship that to me, the stuff that dogs do are really, it's so similar to what humans do. It's incredible. Like
they're way better. They're
so much better.
God. They're God.
Absolutely.
Backwards, right?
Yeah. It's not an accident. Like the fact they know, my dog knows stuff that I don't have to say it. I just think it sometimes. And for a while we were so surprised by it. But now I think about like, yeah, of course she knows it because there's some sort of I must be doing something with my face that she recognizes because it's we're the same. We've co-evolved for so long. We get each other. It's like this thing where it's just new humans, new dogs. That's all there's always, they're all the same.
You see people and their dog, they look like the dog or the dog looks like them. It's unbelievable.
It's insane.
Yeah. Hey, we're kind of at the end of this show, as they say, but I would, I don't know who must be somebody who listened to one of your podcasts, by the way, who said that maybe you mentioned this, but how did you get into Cynicism and Magic, that Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche book?
Well, I think Trussell told me about it.
It was him.
Yeah.
He's the culprit.
Yeah. I love it, though. That stuff, that to me really kind of blew my mind in a weird way, just because it's so, it just flies in the face of all the flowery crap everyone thinks about Buddhism and whatnot. It's so nice to hear Chogyam Trungpa like.
But it says he breaks everyone's balls.
Yeah.
Everyone. You know, because the culture is so immersed in spiritual bypass. We're going to take the same ego shit that we had before, and now we're going to make it spiritual. So everything can get upheld. Our egos can get upheld the way that they were. We're not going to lose anything, but we can characterize it as something else. And I just opened this book. As students and teachers, we can cut down the fortress of spiritual materialism through how we work with situations. We don't combat spiritual materialism through warfare, street fighting, or sending bombs in the mail, but by developing intelligence within ourselves. And that's to me, that's everything we've been talking about: perspective and witness and awareness, and that's and what you said about when we started talking about, I forget what it was, one thing or another around spiritual path, and you said, well, it's people, like when I share this kind of stuff, they get like, what are you talking about? You said that earlier, and I think I came back with eventually reminding people how they are a slave to their stories and their thoughts, basically.
Yeah.
And desire systems and all of it. You want to stay like that? Fuck this. Don't even bother with any of it. It's bullshit. But if you're really unhappy, to constantly be aware if you are getting to that point, or it's through some suffering thing, in terms of what happened to you, or through a psychedelic, or through a teacher, or through a book, or a friend like Duncan, then you got to take up the mantle and go, okay, I got to do something because I just don't want to be in this place because it's unhappy, period.
Yeah, you have to move out of it somehow.
Yeah, well, you got to want to. You really got to
want to. I think a lot of times it just takes, you have to get to a point where you're so sick of it, like you're talking about. Like, I'm so sick of this, I got to figure something out because this just, I'm so tired of eating pizza or something like that.
Oh, God. Duncan goes on about what he was doing that he can't even on a podcast. I wouldn't even mention it because it's so gross that he got into.
I don't even know what you're talking about, but I'm sure I do.
It was something Joe Rogan was, I guess he had this crazy ass sponsor, and was a sex toy. And poor, just awful thing. We actually lost the file. I don't know why.
Oh, wow.
But we did chatted about it, and I had the transcripts, and I said, I don't think you want to find this anyhow. This is awful.
Yeah, the dog deleted it.
Yeah, right. The dog
did you a favor.
That ate it. Oh, talking about dog, everybody out there, you want to find Johnny, JohnnyPemberton, Pemberton.dog. Is that real?
It's
Somebody
real.
gave that to me.
Someone took I let my website lapse, JohnnyPemberton.com, and now they're holding it ransom for like, I don't know, 50 grand, something like that. So
That's a serious story.
yeah, because if they did their research and realized that, I don't know, that maybe I'd want to have the website. Yeah, it's for $24,000 right now. I'm hoping to get it up to 50. I would like them to want to ask more from me for the website. But so JohnnyPemberton.dog is even better. So they can kiss my ass.
Except for you want to maybe have these are serious? These people are, holy shit.
Well, it's probably just a computer, actually. It's probably just something
algorithm.
that just does it automatically. If they look for websites that lapse and they buy them instantaneously,
yeah, right.
and they sell them back to you.
Jesus H. Thanks so much for being here, Johnny.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a delight.
Yeah.
Just chatting here.
Hell yeah.
And we'll make sure everybody, of course, we'll have in the show notes connection to Johnny. And eventually, hopefully, Johnny will be able to spend time in different cities.
Oh, yeah. I am doing some stuff coming up here, but I'm not sure exactly the dates. But I think I'll be in Nashville. Yeah. You'll figure it out.
Where are you going to be?
I'll be in Nashville. I'll be in Tacoma, and I'll be in Portland, and I think I'll be. These are all coming down. These are all not for another month and a half. So,
all right, okay, but you'll be able to. You guys who are living in those areas, JohnnyPemberton.dog, it'll be there. Absolutely. And again, let's do more of this, Johnny. Well, you're in LA and I'm out here.
We're not very far.
Yeah, let's get together.
I'd love to go up there. I haven't been up to
Ojai. Come up to Ojai. Yeah, that would be fabulous. All right, everybody, this is Mind Rolling on Be Here Now Network. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com, and the plethora of amazing podcasters is extraordinary, Johnny.
Podcast.
See you next week, everybody. Thanks, Johnny.
Bye-bye.